Welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reed.
Hey, look at this. We've got a streak going. 2 podcasts in the new year.
It is a streak considering Q4, but I think you had a pretty good excuse.
Yeah. I am so excited to get back to it, though. I've got this list of folks that Eric has invited on, and I'm pumped for it. It's just hard because I think we had 2 weeks in a row since I've been back where guests like pulled out us at the last minute, and then you and I have had stuff that's popped up, and so it's like we've had to miss a week or two. But anyways, today this is I think your inspiration, but we have Kelly Taylor on, who's our new recruiter at Digible. I say new, but 3 months old.
Yeah, we kind of saw this storm hitting, and it's a good storm. Obviously, every company hopes that they have enough growth, I guess, to make you even think about hiring on a full-time recruiter. And that's where we're at, looking at 23 and what we really had the back half of 22. And so, yeah, we went on the search for a full-time recruiter, and gosh, I think I just talked to a few before I crossed paths with Kelly, and just had an amazing first meeting with her. Just could tell from a value standpoint, but also like the volume, which she'll get into on the cast, that she was experiencing, all the processes that she would be bringing to the company, both in the interviewing as well as like the candidate experience. Super passionate about DEI, which is something that we're getting really committed to this year at Digible. And the KPIs, which I know are always big for you, but just like, how do we really measure success? And so I thought she brought a lot of good suggestions to the table there too. So, really thrilled with the work she's done so far, and know there's a lot more that we're going to get out of her. So It's been really good. Yeah.
She's been just a terrific, placement, because when we put up the job description, we knew we needed help, and yet I felt like didn't have a real great chance to, as we're doing now, rehone our accountability chart. So even we didn't really know. We're just like, we need help. And what I loved is like during the interview process, she made it clear, like, well, we made it clear starting with you, like, this is what we don't have together. This is what we have together. And she embraced it and was like, no problem. I actually enjoy building systems from the ground up, and I've got my own theories on things. And we didn't get the hot takes in the episode, but in the interview, we got to some hot takes and such. And it's just, she's made a real impact and has been super flexible at helping us continue to hone, I guess, expectations after the fact versus someone coming in thinking like, hey, whoa, you're changing this, expectations on me midstream, but she's embraced it.
Yeah, she has been really adaptable, and I know she's had her moments here like everybody else, drinking from the fire hose and trying to get up to speed, but also make sure she's executing on, the core, I guess, elements of her job. I think the thing that I'm excited to see, and, she's had more conversations certainly recently with Victor, who leads our engineering teams, but just as really honing those skills, which aren't as point and shoot as a lot of the other roles I think she's had experiences with, including like more of the service side of our business. So I think that's one of her biggest opportunities, and Victor's a good one to pair her with. So that'll be fun to see that kind of develop and evolve. But yeah, I mean, periodically we do bring on some of what we maybe we call our strategic hires onto the show. Just it's part of kind of the company building, and obviously specific to Digible and kind of where we're going with things. But I love hearing that perspective, both kind of what it looked like, because you asked up front, it's like, what did perception versus reality, like, talk us through that. But their kind of entry into Digible, their lives before it, and how it all shakes out. So yeah, we'll have a few more of these, I think, just to tease Olivia, but we got another one on the marketing front that we're excited about, and that'll be fun to have her on the show.
Yeah. And regarding, I guess, like expectations, we had interviewed maybe 3 different outsourced options for recruiting ahead of Kelly, thinking like, okay, is this even too much for one person, what we need to do, and would they need to work hand in hand with the firm, or do we just do a firm, because what if the growth is temporary and not long term, and how do we justify the position over the years to come? And just for perspective, the firms we interviewed really had a great high touch relationship and claim to act as if they're your employee, meaning work within your systems, use your email address and that type of thing. But all of them were like, hey, we really need 90 days to start, like before you'll start seeing candidates. And then Kelly, in her first 2.5 months, I think had 15 offers accepted from people that she worked with. So it's like, well, we were going to pay a firm well more than what a full-time hire was. And they were saying, give us at least 3 months to see candidates. There's definitely a disconnect there. And I can see why there's all this investment in the VC investment in the recruiting space, because it does seem like there's a big gap between if you bring someone on or if you bring the right person on, I guess. I definitely want to give her due versus, if you just go with the traditional options.
Yeah, totally. I think the other thing we're seeing the value, and I am going to give her some credit again, her due, but is just the energy that an in-house recruiter brings, because you can talk extension of the team and whatnot, but if these firms aren't literally living and breathing, because Kelly's here pretty much every day, she comes in, and so she told us, and you hear on the cast, but that a lot of the questions she gets up front is just, what's it like to work there? Talk to me more about, who I'm going to be working for, what the day-to-day looks like. And while she can't, in depth at every position at Digible, she does have a good handle on that. And she can really express, I think the culture in a way that an outsourced firm couldn't. So I love that she can tell somebody, here's what the day-to-day feels like at Digible.
No, it's true. She's here, I think, basically every day. Sometimes she'll bring Scooby, her dog, but I still give her crap because she ties Scooby to her desk. I'm like, let Scooby run free.
We don't know what Scooby might be capable of. Scooby to run free.
Yeah. Well, anything else to hit before they get into the episode?
No, I don't think so. I think, we really picked up steam. Not that the front half wasn't good, but there were some really fun topics that we got to in the second half that I think are going to turn into a follow-up podcast with Kelly. So I'm also excited, as you were talking about kind of the longer-term future and for positions like these, I think Kelly has already shown a lot of curiosity, which is obviously one of our core values, about how this role could evolve or her skill set could, so that she continues to bring value to Digible regardless of how many people we're hiring. She's, I think thinking about it the right way there, instead of like, well, I just hope I can hang on here for a couple of years. I think she's really leaning forward and saying, what else can I do to bring value to the company, which I think is great. Yeah.
In a very, as I've been saying lately, team Digible way. It's like, I think she sees it as like, here's the value and the need today, but 2 years from now, maybe there's not. But then again, maybe there is. But maybe she graduates into something else that she's helped, hone, versus like what this position is right now with creating all the systems and expectations and such.
Yep.
All right. Well, hope you guys enjoy. Okay. We're here with Kelly Taylor. Kelly, introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Kelly. I am our in-house recruiter, Digible's first in-house recruiter. So I've been with Digible since the middle of October. So I guess a little over 90 days now. I guess my whole background is in recruiting since college. So about 6 years now. I had a small stint in copier sales, but for the most part, it's recruiting.
Did you know that, Reed?
Yeah, she mentioned in the interview.
I didn't remember copiers.
I think there was a part of it that you enjoyed, but you also knew it was definitely not something you wanted to stay in.
Yeah, it was just very. I don't know how to put it. It was a grind, I guess. I was going door to door. I mean, I was walking into businesses and just like giving them my business card. And that was like right out of college. So I was very fresh to the world and felt like a little baby walking into.
It's hard to believe you experienced that at all. Like these days as we talk, and I know we'll get into like kind of the modern, modern recruiting, I'll say, but Dave and I laugh at each other, like some of our old sales stories and backgrounds at different companies. And I definitely went through that a couple times, the door to door. And it is a total beatdown. Yeah. It's funny because my girls, we were watching a movie. Have you seen Avalon by any chance? No. You dig it. God, who's the director? Anyways, there's a scene of this guy, and it's actually in the 50s, of him going door to door as a salesman. And my two daughters, the twins, were like, what is he doing? And I was like, that's door-to-door sales. Yeah. And this has happened to me a few times with them, but they were like, what's that? And I was like, well, it's somebody that literally goes door to door and is trying to sell their product, and their minds were blown. The other time that I've told many people about is the first time they saw a commercial. It was in the Super Bowl, and they were like 4 or 5 years old, and they were like, "What was that?" And I was like, "Honey, girls, it was a commercial." So it's just weird as a dad. Yeah, as my kids get further in life, like the things that just totally shock them.
I will watch this. Barry Levinson.
Yeah.
Love Barry Levinson.
He did Rain Man.
Well, yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, you should check it out.
Well, you started a little bit higher than Reed and I as far as your career, because he was selling, I don't even, junk speakers or
calculators and mini boom boxes.
Yeah. Can you imagine going?
No, I could not imagine that.
In Temple, Texas, which is his neck of the woods. And I would actually went up to fast food lines and would knock on people's windows while they were Taco Bell.
Oh my God.
That's the level of aggressiveness I was encouraged to take on.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do that.
It lasted a day, Kelly.
Yeah. I bet.
I was selling knives, so it might as well have lasted a day, because that was also terrible.
Very auspicious beginnings for us.
So then we got you from most recently. Well, I'll let you tell the story, but you were doing recruiting, and I want to hear about like the type of recruiting and then the numbers that they expected, because it just blew my socks off.
Yeah. So I was working for a company called Flock Safety. They're a startup. They were Series B when I started, but recruiting was a new function to Flock, just kind of like Digible. And so I was pretty much doing all of their non-tech recruiting, mainly focused on operations. So I would do like our install techs all the way to project managers and some director of operations roles. But it was all pretty much operations focused. And then I would help out where I could in accounting, marketing, sales, things like that. There was crazy numbers. I mean, in my first year, I hired like over 100 people, which was insane. I was making like 14, 15 offers a week. And we were just kind of pushing them out because we needed technicians and support people so bad that's just kind of where it was at. But so
you got,
it was fun, but it was a lot at once.
Yeah, you got the experience of like 3 years of recruiting in 1 year. Like that
was the most like high volume recruiting I've ever done. I thought my time at ADT was high volume, but when I came to Flock, I was shocked. So it was insane.
So I have a question on that. It actually came up a little this morning as we were talking about our volume and what's fair or realistic as far as, not just you, but in general. And I said, when you were at Flock, I made the assumption that there was outbound campaigns and other things supporting, because that's just not possible for you to be expected to also be creating all the awareness.
Right.
So is that fair? So there was a fair amount of marketing going out, and then you came behind that to do those initial screens. Yeah. Okay, good.
Well, you joined us here, and we had a little bit of a process, but it wasn't well exercised or monitored or any of that stuff. So just curious, like during the interview process and before you got here versus once you got here, what was different? Like almost from your perception. What did you think we were going to be, and then how were, I guess, reality different than that? Yeah,
I think reality was kind of my perception. I think everyone did a great job in the interview process of kind of telling me what your process is now. I don't think when I started there was anything that I was surprised about. I think maybe something I was surprised about was that you got all of this knowledge from a book, which I think is awesome. I didn't even know that the Who book was a thing or that there was really anything out there that could help build a process. So that was surprising to me, but in a good way.
And you were already familiar with Greenhouse.
Yeah. So Greenhouse was my previous applicant tracking system. I think it's the best in my opinion, but
it sure does a lot, but it's sure annoying as a user. Meaning,
I'm still not in love with the user experience, but it has amazing functionality.
Yeah. I mean, it's before this we had nothing. I mean, we truly had nothing.
Excel spreadsheet.
It was 1 year ago that we put Greenhouse in. Yeah.
Yeah, we could have used it about a year earlier, but in 2021 we slowed down dramatically. 2020 we hired like 25 people.
Okay.
And then we were like expecting something similar, and we still had great growth, but it slowed down significantly. And then, you obviously know where we were last year and where we're going to be this year. So it just made all the sense in the world. So glad that we did it.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit then about your process. And you could speak towards either the process that you do today or what your ideal process would look like. Probably matters more.
Yeah. My ideal process would be something that is, I want a process that works across every department. It can be confusing as a recruiter to be working with you're working with multiple different hiring managers who are completely different, but working with different processes can be challenging as a recruiter. So I would hope that we can all agree on, one kind of singular process that works for everything. I think tech is where it would be different because there's a lot of just different aspects of tech recruiting, and the people that you're interviewing are different. You have coding assessments, things like that. But I would love to have kind of like one cohesive interview process for every single department that works across the board. And it just makes it easier to express that to the candidate. It makes it easier on the hiring manager, the recruiter, everything. So
where do you see ReadServe to go here? Like, where in an ideal world does a recruiter begin and where does it end? Because as he mentioned, like, we don't have someone owning like outbound campaigns, and our clients often struggle with generating enough awareness, as he was saying, that they'll ask us to run campaigns for them. So where would a recruiter begin? Where would they end? And, what are the expectations once they hand them off?
I guess from the handoff from what point?
Well, so it sounds like in an ideal world, the recruiter is not doing as much outbound. So would it be, I don't know, 7 out of 10 folks would be inbound, and then once in a while you have to go get somebody that you're like sniping? Yeah,
I would say so. I mean, it really depends on the role too. Typically for like a higher level role or more technical focused role, you're going to have to be sourcing on LinkedIn or, reaching out to people on various different job boards. I mean, I guess it really kind of depends on the role, but I would say for the most part, inbound is ideal. But,
yeah. Our clients, they struggle with leasing agents and maintenance.
Okay.
So maintenance, you're not going to really get that on LinkedIn right when they're going. And then for leasing agents, they oftentimes are very early in their career, so they may not be on LinkedIn.
Right.
So my thought is it probably is, it would be inbound, but it would be, you have to probably spend some money or do something to generate the awareness, at least to be inbound. Because I didn't know property management was a thing when I was coming up. So I wouldn't have even thought to go to an apartment website to look for one.
Yeah, I agree.
So your job, as you see it in the first interview, is more screening.
Yeah.
Right. And what do you screen for? And then what are your expectations after you pass them off?
Right. Yeah. So typically I'm looking obviously at their background and qualifications. I want to make sure that aligns with what we're looking for. So usually just kind of a resume overview. And then something really important to me is why they want to work at Digible. I want to know that they've done some research on the company. And usually I'll look for like a core value. Maybe they'll drop something that aligns with them. A lot of people do. They like our core values because they're real and personal. So typically look for that. And then asking questions. I know the first interview can be kind of, people think I'm HR, so they're asking me a lot more HR focused questions. Mm-hmm. So a little more like thoughtful questions always stand out to me a little bit more, like what my experience has been, how I like working at Digible, what's my favorite thing, like questions like that stand out to me more than just like, what's the pay, what's the time off, things like that, which I know are important, but like you can read that on our job description. So I think the more thoughtful questions stand out to me more. So
do any of those become red flags for you? Almost like if someone's like, you have 30 minutes in the screen or 20 minutes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 30 minutes.
30?
Yeah.
And if their first question is like time off, pay, it's like, well, it's all been disclosed. So does that become almost like you don't want to move them forward? Or do you still, like if they meet your other criteria?
I mean, I think it depends how they ask. Some people are just kind of like bluntly like, this is the most important thing to me, so I need to know this. But I think if it's just more out of curiosity, and I feel like I can get that out of their tone or, how we're talking, I can get that. But I think it can be a red flag if that's just all they care about and that's the only questions they're asking me. It can be a red flag for sure.
Yeah. I could definitely understand by the team. Like if we were hiring salespeople, maybe they like the commission plan is really important to them. And now, like, okay, you're money motivated and we offer this opportunity.
Right.
But if it's something else where there's, it kind of is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's also like you said, like can they even, like if it's an AM, we want them to be very good with detail.
Right.
And if you didn't read the job description in full, that's a problem.
Yeah. So also like listening, like I mention a lot of things that like happen later in the process. And a lot of times those questions will get brought back up. And if that they're asking those questions, that means that they probably weren't listening to me, like who they're reporting to, like who they're going to be talking to. I will always mention who they're talking to. In the confirmations, I'll send like LinkedIn profiles. So like I make sure that they're prepared for who they're talking to. So I think a lot of that just is listening instead of just talking.
Cool.
Well, one of the questions David often asks is, and I don't know if you're going to keep asking this one, but how well do you understand the job? Or tell me, what the day-to-day looks like in this role, something to that effect, right?
I say on a 1 to 10, describe the position to me as you understand it, and 1 to 10, how much of a fit are you? Yeah.
And so maybe another example for you of like, I walk them through that pretty clearly and they should nail that each time that David... I mean, some of these roles, are pretty involved, I'll say. And so that wouldn't be as easy to, I guess, recall, but I didn't know if that's something else that or do you count on the manager to really get into the day-to-day?
Yeah. So I typically don't dive deep into day-to-day because one, I'm not working on that team every day. I don't know all the details, but I will always let them know who they're talking to. I give them team structure, like how many people are on the team, kind of, what the team looks like. So I try to break down the team structure for them and then who they're reporting to, things like that, rather than kind of the day-to-day stuff. I usually have the manager cover that just more than me.
Guessing you were going to go here eventually, but we've been talking a lot about what the measurables are for different seats within our accountability, aka org chart.
Yeah.
And for you, when we interviewed you, you had all sorts of great KPIs. But if there was one to rule them all, what would that be? And then I'm sure that will prompt some sort of response from me and David.
Yeah. I think the biggest KPIs, like the most important to me that I look at is time to hire, just because that correlates with candidate experience, which is obviously really important. So, but yeah, I would say that's the number one thing that I look at and is most important to me.
Surprise you? Agree, disagree? Just in hearing it, like, I mean, I know we're not the experts, but
I like time to hire. I wonder, does that ever, does the accountability ever not fall on you there? Like, if our marketing team was in charge of getting you inbound leads and we had no expectation of outbound, how fair of it is it that you're sort of including their thing?
Yeah, I guess I look at time to hire, I guess, differently. I think you guys look at time to hire from initial posting to offer. I look at time to hire from initial phone screen to offer. So that's mainly what I look. I'm not really looking at when we posted the job because a lot of times we're hiring for multiple positions under the same position. So the data kind of gets different, I guess, if you're hiring multiple people for one position that's posted for, a month or 2 months. So I think that's kind of how I track it.
Got it. Yeah.
I want to know how long it took them from when I spoke to them to when we made them an offer.
Yeah. So then the breakdown might be, we definitely would need to look downstream at some point and say, or upstream, whatever. Yeah. Upstream. Like, what if you didn't talk to anybody for 6 months, right? Because we had no inbound traffic.
Right.
At that point, it's not included in your time to hire because maybe you get them hired in 10 days.
Right.
But there's a big gap for us as a company, Team Digible. We need to figure that out, that 6 month thing.
Well, it parallels a lot of the conversation that we have with our clients just about leads versus quality leads, which is something we've been talking about since Digible started. And I think the time to hire gets at that pretty effectively as far as the quality, that you're bringing to the table or that you're screening.
Right.
So if that's one of the main functions of your role is making sure that our hiring manager's time isn't being wasted with a bunch of crap, candidates.
Yeah.
Sorry, that sounded harsh, but that would make sense to me. But as you said, depending on the role, it may be that your KPI would be more number of applicants or prospects than it would necessarily the quality or the time to hire. So the example of you mentioning executives and technical being more difficult to source, you can't rely on the inbound as much. So therefore, your role shifts a little bit.
Right.
It's like, now we really need you to go out there and find this person.
Yep.
Therefore, you would take a greater, I guess, level of responsibility on just how many people are we getting looks at.
Right. Yeah. And there's, I mean, when you're sourcing on LinkedIn, that's the biggest source for, tech roles and directors and things like that. They have their own data that you can pull of like how many people you reached out to, what was the percentage of people that replied to you, so you can kind of fix your messaging, things like that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of strategy around that.
I know that you jumped in when we were already needing to move quickly, and you've done a great job of, I think our data had been like 72 or 76 days or something time to hire, down to like 20 something with you. So you've made a huge impact already and people have felt it. But I could understand, once we get a chance to like even out for a minute, if part of our process becomes you meeting with the hiring manager and say, hey, here's what I'm doing for you. Here are my expectations of you.
Right.
And you almost giving them feedback to be like, hey, my goal is to get them to interview within 5 days.
Right.
And you're taking 14 days. I'm losing good candidates.
Right.
Or, hey, like you can hit people on LinkedIn, but you need them to do it, I don't know, 10 times a week,
right,
as well, because like the hiring manager may get a different look than you. You and I had talked about that before, like coming from me or Reed, they may respond differently than you, and that could be a positive.
Yeah.
So 100%. I could see that as a great part of the process. And then putting a goal out there, like we'll get this person within X time,
right?
Or that's what we want to do, right?
Yeah, we've done that already. We've had leaders here share on LinkedIn, and they get way more, traction and people reaching out to them versus when I post it, or, so yeah, just interesting.
One of the questions I want to, I guess, come back to is on the outbound. So how much has changed? And you've been in it relatively, I don't want to say short amount of time, but 6 years isn't 30 years.
Right.
So, but how much has changed there as far as the tactics to create that awareness? So LinkedIn is a given, but you can expand on that, because especially, I don't want to say it's a surprise, but on the technical like positions, it seems to me that there be more niche kind of job platforms that would perform better, but maybe just not the case. But where I'm going with this is back to parallels with multifamily. The conversation for the last 10 years around advertising and marketing has been dominated by how much digital marketing and advertising versus ILS, which is the apartments.com, Zillow, effectively, the same as job boards. Yep. And so I was just curious, from your perspective, how much of that same conversation is happening, and how much has the pendulum shifted from, let's just put a bunch of stuff on syndicated job feeds like Indeed, all that stuff, and LinkedIn, to, hey, and I don't mean it in a leading way, but, more one-to-one marketing using digital advertising. So whether that's paid search, whether that's through social, et cetera, hopefully I've drawn the line clear enough, but it just seems like there's so many commonalities between what's happening in our industry and what's happening with recruitment. Right.
Yeah. Obviously job boards can be effective, but I think when you're just throwing them out there, you're getting a lot of the applications you're getting really aren't good applications. So I feel like if you can have a different type of strategy where you can like hone in on very specific people in a certain industry or have a certain skill set, that's better than like just throwing it out to the job boards and getting 500 applications, where I can send out 10 really specific messages, or, any type of marketing, like social marketing, I think is huge. Like I came across Digible from a TikTok that I saw. And so
I had no idea.
Yeah. So, it's like people are finding companies in different ways. And so I think we can use that as our benefit too, just as a digital marketing company, putting more things out on the internet about Digible, in different ways, rather than LinkedIn, Indeed, all the typical job boards that every single company is on. So, and not every company has TikTok. And I would say majority of people are on TikTok these days.
Yeah, so. Especially our demographic.
Right. Yeah. So hopefully that
just blow your mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, what was the TikTok about?
It was, I forgot what it was. Or it was, you guys were doing an advertisement for like what are they called? When you guys go to like a event, you were going to a conference or something. Okay. And it was like a Friends or something commercial, kind of like where you guys were like turning in the chairs.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And then that just made you interested.
Yeah. And then I clicked on the profile and I saw like, act as your manager. So people were like impersonating Reed and you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I just thought it was kind of funny, and it showcased,
our
kind of your culture. Yeah. And just kind of a fun environment to work in.
Yeah. So also shows that it wasn't you just, looking at like open positions.
Right.
You became aware of a company that you thought was interesting, and then you dove in further. So
That's great. I love it because, one of the folks we were interviewing for project manager last week mentioned that I think it was either LinkedIn or TikTok, but the video that Erica posted of herself working from Greece really caught his attention, and he was like, wow, that's a cool company. Mm-hmm. So it is fascinating, and I love it, more kind of right brainer, less orthodox, approach to like getting people's attention. Yeah. As long as, the culture follows through behind it, but that's our problem, not the candidates.
Yeah. And that it doesn't feel, that remains authentic, doesn't feel super cheesy.
Right.
That's the problem. It can start to go the other direction. Yeah. What's your feedback loop? So like, let's say you pass on a candidate to somebody, mm-hmm. What do you expect back from them if it didn't work out or if it did work out?
Yeah. So usually, I have kind of like a SLA with my hiring managers, like typically 24 hours, let's fill out the scorecard. Mm-hmm. And typically I'll just go in greenhouse and look, read the feedback. And then if it's a yes, we're moving them on. If it's a no, we're rejecting. Yeah, usually within 24 hours, if I don't get it, I'll just send them a Slack and say, what are we doing? Because I don't typically want to leave a candidate hanging past 2 days. Mm-hmm. So,
what are you, as you mentioned, you're not you're not interviewing for technical skills. So when you pass them on, they get, I guess, interviewed for technical skills in that second mm-hmm. one. So what is an acceptable, I guess, ratio of you passing someone and then making it from the second interview to the third interview?
Like a good pass-through rate, I guess?
I'm just imagining, like, on one hand, you could send a bunch of people that fit your original screening, mm-hmm. but once they get to the next stage, it was like, wow, this person didn't have those skills, but you aren't the one to interview for those skills. But on the other hand, you probably don't want to get super closed off, because I also believe, like, some people believe in training someone up from the ground because they have no bad habits, and other people believe I want someone to come in. So maybe that's part of the original setup with the hiring manager, but just curious your pass-through rate and what you view as a good, I guess, band.
Yeah, I would say, I think like 50 to 60% is a good pass-through rate. Because obviously, not every candidate is going to kind of pass through there, but I think it's good for hiring managers to talk to people that may not be completely qualified for the job versus people that are. So I don't know. I think 50 to 60% is a good kind of pass-through rate when you're looking at past me.
Do you think anybody's messed up yet? Did you have someone that you're like, this person is a gold star and we passed?
I don't think so. I think maybe there's been a couple that I've been like, we should give them a chance. Maybe I think that's just me, maybe personally connecting with them, more just like past work. So I think that's probably where it comes from. So, but I don't think there's been anyone where I'm like, oh my God, you made a huge mistake. So
I think I know a couple.
Yeah.
That you and I might have agreed on there. So question on, what you're seeing out there in the market. I brought up a couple times, and obviously we recently updated our job descriptions to reflect all the cool things that we've added now to our total comp at Digible. But it just blew me away looking at some competitors, what they are now putting in their perks and all that. So I'm just curious to hear your take on what really is connecting with, I was about to say residents, with candidates, what's really hitting the mark. And you don't have to go, I guess, into the stuff that you think is just, kind of silly and meaningless. But obviously with what's out there and how competitive it's gotten, there are things that candidates seem really drawn to. And so not to feed you, but I can start with the 4-day work week. It sounds like
I was going to say that's probably the number one thing that I hear is the 4-day work week. I think people see that as us valuing work-life balance, but also the work from anywhere policy. Remote work is obviously trending right now. It's probably not going to ever stop trending. So I think the work from anywhere, people having the flexibility to work from home or work from Greece or wherever it might be, is really valuable to people. Some people don't feel comfortable in an office, can't maybe do their job effectively in an office. So having that option for people to feel comfortable, people love that. And then our new fringe benefits, I've been hearing a ton about the reimbursement for physical wellness as well as mental health. So with mental health, a lot of insurances don't cover costs associated with counseling or therapy or any type of medication you might need for anything like that. But so I think just having that is reaching out to people, are liking that a lot. So
Yeah.
the less obvious, I guess. So
yeah, no, that's great. And we did a survey internally, which I thought
Yeah.
was great, to ask about those fringe benefits and see where, people were most interested. David's brought up a couple times some things that maybe aren't as top of mind, but would have huge value, like whether it's tuition reimbursement. You mentioned daycare. What we recognize, though, is that while that may have a ton of value, if only 10% of your company would actually take you up on it.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's hard about what you put out there, is you don't get a chance necessarily to survey the whole market.
Right.
Not that you couldn't do some of that research, but that's what's not kept me up at night. But I've just thought about it. It's like, as we're trying to make all these upgrades, are we really hitting the mark with candidates? It seems like, what we've done, what we recently rolled out really has been a big upgrade.
Definitely think so. And I always, when people ask about our culture, I always tell them, like, they surveyed all of our employees to see what's important to us. So it's a very employee-centric culture. And a lot of companies aren't like that. It's just kind of like, here's our benefits and we don't care what you think about them. So the fact that we're surveying our employees to see what's important just shows that Digible does truly values the employees and our happiness.
That might be a soundbite right there, Kelly. Yeah. I think we'll have to pull that one out. Go ahead.
It just made me think, like, how you mentioned that Kelly mentioned that not everybody does like a homework assignment, like engineering, which I want to come back to.
Yeah.
But I could also see us in the future, back to the Easter eggs you and I used to talk about, having Rachel redo the job description and dropping things in the benefits, like ability to wear open-toed shoes or whatever, and some other things to basically see have they even read the darn like job description, but in a quirky, way.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much of an impact that has, and it seems so basic to me that if you're interviewing for a job, you should show that you've done some homework.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the amount of people that don't even make that effort, it's an easy thing, I'm sure, for you, as you mentioned, like screening, just to say, sorry, if you haven't even looked at our website. It takes a lot
of time. Like, you can just scan a website for 5 minutes and pull 3 facts about the company,
but not David's Easter eggs. So that shows whether someone's really paying attention is when you drop in those things and see if they're able to call that out. I have more of a somewhat funny, if she has can remember something, but I'll save it. This is just about train wrecks, but
I have
I don't want to forget
one other theory question on homework. So it's common with people that write code to do it. And I recently heard a quote from Seth Godin, who's a pretty famous marketer, who says, "I can't work with you until I work with you." And he believes in basically paying someone a consulting fee to do a project before you bring them on, because somebody can interview well, and we've all had that, right? So I'm just curious on, and the reason he says pay them is that way, if you then want to, you can use it, or if you hire someone else, you're like, hey, we paid a consultant and they told us this thing.
Right.
So I'm curious on your thoughts around giving candidates homework or not.
I have never been a huge fan of giving candidates homework, like a project or presentation. But I mean, I think if they're getting paid, that's a whole different story, because essentially they're, like, if you're giving them a project, you're not paying, they're doing work for free for you. And I think that turns a candidate off from your company a lot if you're requiring them to do that. And sometimes I don't even really think it's necessary sometimes, but I mean, I think if you're paying them, I think that's a whole different story.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not settled on it either. I could see, like, there are certain positions, as I mentioned, where we wouldn't, maybe we want someone that's got no experience on purpose so we can train them up. But one of the examples, this actually came out of the Dan Martell book where he mentioned Seth Godin. One of his examples was, if he's hiring an executive assistant, he gives them a project. He says, hey, send Kelly a gift. And that's the only instructions he gives them. And then if they come back and they ask him 10 questions about Kelly, he's like, you're not the candidate, because he needs an executive assistant to take the effort off of him.
Right.
He's like, I just want you to send a simple gift. But if that candidate then goes through and researches Kelly and finds out she loves s'mores or something, then he's like, gold star, right? I'll hire you. So I thought it was super interesting. But I also know right now we're a little behind on where we want to be. So maybe we couldn't afford that. But as we get caught up, that's an area that would be interesting to me to explore because of the gift thing.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I have one more comment I'll say on the paid audition. I'll put it that way. But we did a focus group with DU students 4 years ago, brought them in and, we're asking them about their own apartment search experience, customer journey, all this stuff. But towards the end, as we were talking about kind of their careers, like we weren't trying to get too profound, but just, some advice. It occurred to me that especially earlier in your career, it's as valuable to them that they get to test the employer as the employer testing them.
Right.
And it would be interesting for more job seekers, especially I think early in their careers, to take that mindset, because I think most employers would be open to it.
Yeah.
I mean, we take a huge risk whenever we bring anybody on,
Right.
and we do see it as a permanent kind of not lifetime commitment, but we do think in terms 2 to 3 years, and we hope more. And so if somebody came to me and said, hey, I'm just as interested to know whether all this cool stuff I've been happening is real or heard is real or not.
Right.
And then we enter into a 90-day agreement on both sides. I think it's a win-win.
Yeah.
But most, kids coming out of school never even think that way.
Right.
They're just like, whatever I got to do to get a job.
Right.
And next thing you know, they're a year in and they're like hating the company in their life. And they're like, it's like, well, that could have changed with just a different way of positioning it.
Yeah. I actually, when I started at Flock Safety, I started on a 2-week contract. And I got to kind of see the process and meet people and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a cool introduction to the company before I fully committed to working for them.
Totally.
So I could see something like that as well.
Yeah. Well, it's like when you go on a first date, you don't really know that person. As Chris Rock, I think, put it. He's like, that's a representative of that person. That's not the real person. You got to be with them for 6 months before you really know who you're talking to.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
Well, Reed, what's your train wreck?
Well, my train wreck, because we had a few, I won't share those stories. And you don't have to be explicit if somehow it would reveal that you were the person talking to them. But especially during the pandemic, I think there was a lot of stories of some pretty wild interviews.
Yeah.
Because people were just getting acclimated to like Zoom, which sounds crazy, but for the masses, I think that's fair to say. And so I didn't know if you had some all-time classics as far as like, that person showed up in a bathrobe, like on an interview.
Yeah.
I'm dying to tell.
I know
our ultimate train wreck, but it's just so extreme that if somehow, like I would feel terrible if it somehow, came back to this person. So,
I guess probably the biggest train wreck was on a Zoom. The girl, because, everyone was like Zooming with their families and you can change your name on Zoom.
Yeah.
She had something like extremely inappropriate on her Zoom. Like, I don't know who she was Zooming with. It definitely wasn't a family member. But it was very, I
love it.
Yeah, it was way out there. And I don't think she realized it until like after the interview, because she emailed me and was like, I'm so sorry. She was like, when I hung up, I realized that I didn't like change the name on there.
Oh my God.
I was like, I'm like, no judgment, but I'm like, you gotta like change. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, that's so bad.
Well, and if the job she was applying for had any attention to detail being a priority, then
and it was like the first thing I noticed too. I mean, I don't know why I always like look at people's names on Zoom, and I was just baffled, like just could not believe it.
Wow.
So
that's terrible.
Well, David, I think was on this call, but I'm not positive if you were on the call with Victory when I came on with the cherry blossom like superimposed on my head.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately it wasn't with a candidate, but it could have been. My sister was like everybody was trying to stay in touch early in the pandemic, so there's all these family Zooms and half the people don't know how to operate a Zoom. Right. And so my sister was like, forget Zoom. You should check out Snapchat. They have all these like super fun, like superimposed things you can do. Yes. And I've been keeping my 4-year-old entertained.
Yeah.
And so she showed me all of these and it took me forever to finally get it installed, but then I couldn't uninstall it and I just forgot. And I came into this meeting with David and Lurch and it was like, I don't know, their CEO. I mean, there was like 10 of us.
Yeah.
And I pop on a little late, shocking. And I had cherry blossoms on my head. And their CEO just was like, welcome, Reed. he didn't call it out immediately. I was like, why is everybody looking at me funny? Yeah. So.
And you were, you couldn't get over. It took like 20 minutes of a derail. You're like, how do I uninstall this?
Yeah. I was like, I can't turn off my camera without, like the cherry blossoms like needed to stay on there. So anyways, it was like embedded. It was a whole thing.
Oh, that's funny.
what was the worst interview you had, Reed? Meaning you personally when you're going out for a job. Have you had a train wreck?
You mean with like
when you were the candidate?
Where I bombed or where the employer was like,
oh, well, if you have a better one that direction, I'll listen to it.
Gosh, I'm trying to think. I don't know. Honestly, I've been fairly selective and, well, I guess as soon as those words came out of my mouth, it hit me like, but it was my first professional job, which was the same as yours. I think it was. I mean, you and I have those funny ones from when we were teens and whatnot. But when I got out of college, I interviewed with Verizon, and it was for a call center selling online advertising and Yellow Pages. And I was driving from Austin to Dallas to go to this interview, and I ran out of gas on the way.
Oh no.
And so I was on 35, which doesn't probably mean anything to you, but is probably one of the most dangerous highways in the country. And I was just about to come up over this hill, and, gas is out. And so me and my friend had to move my car off to the shoulder, and 18-wheelers were like blowing by us at like 85 miles an hour.
Oh God.
I was a little worried about my safety. And then I called the gal, the HR or whatever, the recruiter, and I was like, "You're not going to believe this." And she was like, "Really?" And I was like, holding the phone up. I was like, "Yes,
I actually happened." Yeah.
Yeah. And so proud to say though that I was still able to turn that into a job. So I was like, "Why don't we just do this over the phone?" And she's like, "I guess I'll give you a pass." And ended up with the gig. And funny enough, that you could say on some level is how David and I don't want to say met, but it's the whole sliding doors thing. But it's like,
that's awesome.
If that hadn't happened, he and I probably wouldn't even know each other.
I-35 is the road that my buddy had bet me to run to Oklahoma on.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You talk about danger. I went up through a College Station, and I was like, I will get killed. And obviously that's why the state trooper picked me up, because he's like, "Son, this is not where you should be."
Why is it so dangerous?
It's just the speed, and there are a lot of truckers, and I don't want to stereotype, but many of them I think are using alternatives to staying awake, and and then you have a bunch of college students too, so it's just a bad combination.
It goes through like cow land at different places, and it's just like 2 lanes. So it's rough.
Scary.
No lighting.
All
right, so I know we don't have too much time, Reed, but what else did you?
Well, I wanted to ask, and I don't know that I call it archaic, and I'm hoping you'll say, well, just explain your thoughts on job fairs and events, and that it's not just simple as hit or miss. Because I think that's one of the questions right now, as far as where we're at, what the future looks like. What are some of the things in recruitment that you could see fading away versus things that will probably be here years from now? And job fairs is one that comes up, and then your position is one that comes up. So I didn't want to forget that, because we talked a little bit about it before you hopped on. But as we look at all the disruption that technology is creating, and AI, and again, using multifamily, it's the leasing agents. So we now have these bots that are on websites and apparently are saving 50-60% of the work or time that a leasing agent would be dealing with. But what if they get to 80%? Then does that completely disrupt that workforce, where it's like, well, now leasing agents, there's a huge reduction, in staff. So, but first question is just on job fairs and events, whether you think that still can be a valuable strategy, and do you expect it to be here 20 years from now, where people are still doing those? And then second part is your own position.
I see the value in job fairs for internships and entry-level positions, but that's really it. I mean, I just went to a job fair a couple weeks ago, and I didn't really see a whole lot of value out of it. I mean, I talked to a ton of people, but a lot of them are just not specific to what we're looking for, or, maybe a different major, things like that. So I could see job fairs going away, and maybe being more virtual. I know there's a lot of software out there that are partnering with colleges to do kind of like virtual career fairs, where you like apply to a certain role and you like automatically get, an interview with a recruiter, like something more like that rather than traditional job fairs. Just because I've never had like huge success at job fairs, unless we have, a full internship program or something like that. It's definitely valuable, but that's kind of really where I see the only value.
Cool.
Yeah.
I have one other question, but I wanted you to finish the second half of that, which was, and I will go more extreme. This is the best way to get, in my opinion, the fun answers, but 2050.
Yeah.
So almost 30 years from now. And just for reference, Amazon, Google, Netflix, Facebook didn't exist 30 years ago.
Right.
So think ahead 3 decades. Do you still think that we'll have a recruiter such as yourself in the mix?
I guess I really don't know. I know I even interviewed with a company who did this one-way recruiting. So it's a software where they're able to ask questions and then you video yourself answering them. So you're essentially just talking to yourself, but it's just like one way. So kind of eliminates the recruiter. I could see a lot of companies moving towards that just because it's so easy. You can just click a button and send this interview out to somebody. So I could see that happening. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I see the future of recruiting.
Well, you can come back to us on that one, but that's a good example of what's changing. I think the question for the employer is what's more effective, because just because you have these bots that can do a lot of this work doesn't mean that they're more effective at sourcing great talent.
Yeah.
And I think there's still something to be said for the pitch, if you will, because as you said, a lot of the questions you get are almost HR based, but they ask you all these questions. Not that those couldn't be answered.
Human out of the recruiting. Like there's already a conception of recruiters just being like robots, and like I don't know, it takes that out, and also the candidate experience. Like I don't think that's a great experience to go on and look at myself in a video and talk, and answer questions. So I think it will depend on the company and what they value. If they value the candidate experience, they'll have a recruiter, and if they don't, then they'll use a robot or whatever.
I think the biggest question then, David, I'll let you comment on this, but is we often talk about the experience and kind of assume that kind of radical change or elimination of certain jobs won't happen because of the experience, which I think logically makes sense to me. However, if I look at my girls and how they're interacting right now with the world, it's not that they don't value human interaction, but they are being brought up, in a different era where there is a much higher comfort level, and maybe, they see it as the better experience to be able to talk to Alexa, in getting things done. And therefore our assumptions are assumptions of our generation, not what my girls would actually favor.
Right.
That's what I don't know when we talk about the experience of people. It's like, but if a generation underneath us isn't having that experience, why do we think that they would favor it? Right. So bigger questions.
It's a good thing to think about.
I think you guys are both right. I think there's going to be a role for them. But part of it could also be on, do they have the process down yet? Right. Like a lot of times when you're in an early stage, you're hiring people because you're like, there's a problem here and I don't have time to fix it. Just hire someone to go handle it. Right. So I could see recruiters being used in that way. But then in a way, it's like I could understand a world where Kelly almost worked herself out of her current job because she built the process so well, tied the technology together so well, yada, yada. And then she could focus on something else. Right. So I don't think it is a position that won't exist. But I think you bring up a great point, Reed, about because I think about the gig workers, and a lot of people went into gig because they also wanted to have full flexibility, and autonomy, but not have like the responsibility of like doing like QuickBooks or whatever, right? And they didn't want to talk to people. They're just like, oh, I'll go do Lyft today, and I'll go do, Uber Eats tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah. Well, my last question is around DEI, and I love again that when you came into Digible, you said, well, there's also a B, which is belonging. Mm-hmm. And you can speak just a little bit generally about your kind of passion behind that and the importance of it, which all hopefully is fairly obvious, but any other flavor or color would be happy to hear. But my question in it, and David, to his credit, I feel like for a while has been pushing internally for us to get better about this and rethink some of our as he said, we didn't have great process or strategy, but recruiting efforts, and has knocked on a few doors, platforms, as well as some nonprofits, some for-profit, to help us get more opportunities to bring that DEI into Digible. I think a lot of companies get defeated, and in some ways we were one of them. Like, we're trying to do this, but we're just not finding much success. And is this really more of a byproduct of the industry we're in or the market we're in? And what I found particularly discouraging that I think I shared with you is that in many ways, companies have made it harder, not easier, despite all the talk about DEI, to really connect with that candidate pool. And in some cases, like putting high costs on it, which is just so aggravating. It's like you're literally, discouraging me by saying you have to pay $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 either through recruiting, like a headhunter, or through a platform in order to have more opportunities to bridge that gap, which I just think is really, not to keep,
I'll give some flavor,
just disappointing to me. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it. But David, anything to add?
We had interviewed a platform maybe 2 years ago now to advertise that sort of went after these underrepresented populations, and they were asking for $30,000 commit. And I said, great, could you tell me what kind of traffic your website gets? I said, we don't release those numbers. I said, okay, well, could you tell me like how many candidates have found a position on your thing? They're like, we don't release those numbers. And it just gets my blood boiling even now, because it's like, well, why should I invest in you? I don't even know if I'm going to get the candidates in. Like, I don't know if you have one visitor. Was it just me last month? And they said, well, Google and Facebook use it, so you should trust them. So that they have a lot of money to throw at this, and they can check that box. It's not us. We want to make sure we're solving our issue, not just checking a box that we're advertising on those platforms.
That's such a great example, because I feel like that is as much about pleasing shareholders, the optics of a company, where it's like, well, we use these platforms, we're invested there. It's like, and so they check the box, but for a large portion of the employer base, that's not something that you have the means to do or the money to do, but you very much want to be making a positive difference as far as who you're employing and the opportunities that you give. And that just, it just seems so counter, to the whole thing. But anyways, any thoughts before we wrap up on DEI, your feelings about trying to get more of that, as David said, underrepresented, minorities within the population into Digible?
I think so. DEI I think is a lot of people don't really understand fully what DEI means. I think a lot of people just kind of put it into one bucket. But there's a lot of ways to attract more diverse talent. And one, it starts internally by us having a more diverse interview panel, us, putting things out about Black History Month, or, we have a little DEI statement on our website and on our job description, so people know that we're valuing and that we're actively making a change. And I think the interview process is a great example and a great way to make diverse people feel comfortable in the process when they're talking to people with different backgrounds, people that don't look like them, things like that. So I think it kind of does start internally. I don't think you need to spend thousands of dollars to go on a job board that supposedly gets more diverse candidates, when you can build your own strategies by reaching out to, different networks at schools. And, there's DEI groups within colleges that you can reach out to. You can, get people that way. So I think there's a lot of different strategies, and you don't need to be, spending thousands of dollars on it. But I think there just needs to be like a more general understanding of what DEI is, past just, one thing.
Totally. So. Well, I love the inside out kind of thinking or approach there. And that is what helped us initially just build the company, was referrals from our own employees. And so as you start to, diversify more, than if you're still focused, like you said, on its top of mind, then you hope that will build on itself instead of just paying for it. So love your thinking. Like
different company, like at my previous company, we had ERG groups. So we would have, a group of Black women of Flock. We had LGBTQ, like we had all these like very specific ERG groups where people could feel like they feel like they belong, and they can talk to people. And I think that's another, huge point and good way to get, us, more diverse people within our company.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Well, as we shut down, Kelly, why don't you drop an Easter egg, give us a fun fact, and then if a candidate listens to your interview before they interview with you, they can then bring up your fun fact.
Yeah. I feel like I always use this fun fact, but in the past, like 8 years, I've lived in 6 different states.
Cool. So now if you're a candidate interviewing for Digible and you get to the end of this, you can say, hey, Kelly, I've also lived in 6 states or 1 state, but I'd love to live in 6.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate you playing ball here.
Thank you.